Welcome to Breakout Room B, Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, USERRA rights. I'm Monique Martin, your moderator, and your speaker today from ESGR is John Natterstad. Welcome, John. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm John Natterstad. I'm a Department of Defense civilian volunteer. They actually have those, and the ESGR volunteers are that. We have one full-time employee that works for at the state of Washington, and everybody else is volunteers. So we're here as volunteers. I spent 30 years in the National Guard, so I understand how employer and your civilian employer and your military employer work. And so we're really grateful for all you employers. An employer is actually twice the citizen. People who provide jobs, pay taxes, create wealth, those are your employers. And if they employ and National Guard and Reserve members, that is a way of providing half of our armed forces to the United States. And so you're actually twice the citizen, and we appreciate that. And by doing that, we have a high quality reserve force, which is out there serving the country and our communities in natural disasters. So for today's presentation, I'm going to have there's a short video and then a PowerPoint presentation. And then we're going to go back to the ESGR website and talk about some frequently asked questions, just to show you where they are, so you have an idea of where you can go find information. There's a lot of good information on UCERRA and other aspects of ESGR on that website. And it's just, you just type in ESGR, it takes you right there. Any questions on all that? Okay, let's go. Nicole, would you, or is it Monique? Would you put on the video?
Today, our nation's all-volunteer military is 2.1 million strong. These extraordinary men and women serve both overseas in the defense of our nation and in our local community when called upon. A critical part of today's military is the National Guard and the Reserve, which make up 40% of the joint force. Because members of the Guard and Reserve serve in both the military and civilian workforce, they need the support of their employers when they deploy for weeks or months at a time, often on short notice. At the same time, these patriotic employers face their own challenges as they support the needs of the nation. Enter ESGR, Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve. Established in 1972, the main role of ESGR is to help employers understand, value, and support their employees' military service.
We work in every way we can creatively and proactively to reach out to our nation's employers.
From seminars to educational experiences like boss lifts, ESGR consistently helps employers understand what it's like to serve in the military.
So it's a learning opportunity for them, and that's what we hope to accomplish through all the things that we do.
In this way, ESGR exposes employers to the unique experience and capabilities that Guard and Reserve members bring to the workplace.
Hiring people who serve in the Guard and Reserve is not just the right thing to do, it is also the business smart thing to do. You know that they are dependable, they are team leaders, they are mission focused. That's a good hire as far as I'm concerned, and I don't care what business you're in.
Veterans have a proven track record of success. So whether you're talking about a military spouse or you're talking about someone in the Guard or Reserve, companies recognize that veterans are a great hire.
While ESGR is a voice for the members of the Guard and Reserve, it also very much works for the nation's patriotic employers.
And we're the voice for employers within the Department of Defense. So we advocate in both ways. We hope to strike a healthy balance there where we're a benefit to both.
A key benefit of ESGR is that it offers free services, helping employees and employers understand USERRA, the federal employment protection law for service members, and mediating UCERA cases are both very important parts of ESGR's mission.
ESGR is important because they serve as that interface to help us to make sure that we're fulfilling our obligation. It's been a great partnership for us.
ESGR also provides a suite of recognition opportunities, including the Patriot Award, the 7 SEALs Award, and the prestigious Secretary of Defense Employer Support Freedom Award.
We think it's important to tell the nation the great things that American employers are doing. We're really blessed in this country to have that kind of support coming from the nation's great employers.
This employer-employee relationship is so important that in celebration of ESGR Week, A presidential proclamation stated, "Because of the vital importance of our National Guard and Reserve forces to our national security, those who employ them are key partners in the defense of our nation." While ESGR provides education and mediation, what makes ESGR unique is that it is made up of over 3,000 unpaid volunteers.
We're volunteers. We are not paid a single dime to go out and do what we do. And to my ESGR volunteers, it is an honor and a privilege for me to have the opportunity to serve with you.
If you are a member of the Guard or Reserve, or if you are a company or organization of any size that has employees that are a member of the Guard or Reserve, ESGR is ready to serve you. And if you want to stand for those that stand for us, join our volunteers that make a real difference each day. Visit esgr.mil to learn more, because we all serve.
All right. So that's kind of a little synopsis of what we do and who we are. So now we'll go to the PowerPoint. So it's the first one. It says making a success of two careers: your military career and your civilian career. And then you also have to add into that your family. When we say we all serve, that includes the families. And so those are the two: the employer and your family are the two things that help in the retention of highly qualified members of the reserve. So this is kind of who we are and who we support. Next slide. So this is objective here is you learn a little more about USERRA, some of the basics, and how the law helps reservists. And it's both for the service members and employers. You give you an idea of these resources are available to you too if you have questions. Okay, let's go to the next slide. There's a little bit on what we are. I'll let you go ahead and read that. So we're here basically to protect the rights and of the employers and the employee and service members, so that we have a high quality reserve force. Next slide. So the primary purpose is to protect employment rights of persons who also served in the uniformed services. So that's why it's important. A lot of employers are very good, and this is helps to protect the service member who wants to serve their country and also wants to maintain a quality employment, civilian employment. Next slide. Here's what it applies to. Your past and current employees with the uniformed services, full or part-time employees, applicants for employment and uniformed services, anyone's assisting someone to obtain USERRA rights, employers with even one part-time employee in regular military reserve, National Guard, and natural disaster and medical systems. So it employs, it applies to everybody. Now there's a note down here when they're on active duty for natural disasters. There's some changes going on in that realm. The state of Washington has what we call a mini USERRA, and there's some protections there that are coming, and particularly from all the deployments that we've had recently. Next slide. So National Guard service members can contact the state attorney general recording issues if they have, but that's a way. But you can also call the 1-800 number. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Also want to apologize. It's allergy season for me right now, and so it's bugging me a little bit today. USERRA protects the employment rights of individuals who serve in uniformed services. So when they deploy, it's like they never left. And when they come back, when they come back, it's come back to you. It's like they never left. So it protects their pay, protects their benefits while they're on active duty. Okay, next slide. Okay, what the military, remember, you have to provide notice to the employer, verbal or written. Doesn't have to be a written notification. Sometimes you just have to let you know. We prefer that they do it in writing. It's kind of a courtesy thing, but it's not required by the law. So yeah, if they've served for 5 years away and then come back, you still have rehire rights, even if they said they're not coming back. They have to serve under honorable conditions and return to work in accordance with USERRA guidelines. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Military responsibilities. You have to report back in a certain amount of time. So it depends on how long they're deployed. So here's some criteria on that: 1 to 30 days. Next scheduled work day, 31 to 180 days. They have a little more time, 14 days. If they're gone for 181 plus days, a full employment for a long time, then they have to report back within 90 days. So they give them a little bit of time to get their things together, get their affairs together. And that is also, there's a requirement. They have to be given, if they're coming off of a real weekend, there's a requirement that they get 8 hours of rest time. We don't want them to report to work and not be successful there, or possible injury, or injury getting to work. Next slide. So we do provide your employer with a deployment schedule as far in advance as possible. Sometimes some deployments come up fairly quickly, others are months in advance. So then communicating back and forth. Sometimes the big machine goes to work and it doesn't always. Sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later. So we ask the service member to keep you informed of when they're going to be deploying, and then when any updates on changes that might happen. And that's to maintain the communications. And then when they're coming back off deployment, it's best to we advise the service members to keep you informed so that you'll know when they're coming back and what are the adjustments that happen there. And then emergency contact information. That's really important too. Next slide. Okay, so we asked them to show appreciation to you, invite you to the boss lifts. That one you saw in the video of the air wing, or our KC-135s over in. They fly the reserves will fly people on aircraft up here in Washington, in the Everett area. They have the Navy base, and we'll take employers out on the ships. What ESGR provides you is an opportunity to go out on a military facility on military aircraft or ships. It gives us we have the authority to do that. So it's a good thing for the employers. We're out on the Lincoln and for a boss lift, and there were these kids talking about they ran the nuclear plant on that ship, and they were going through the details of that. A lot of the employers were pretty impressed with the knowledge that they had, the skills that they had, and how they handled themselves. And that's all those great things that we see in our reserve members. Okay, next slide. Okay, so military obligation cannot be used as a motivating factor to hire, promote, or deny a pay raise. So they'll have a military leave of absence. They want prompt reinstatement. So when they come back and during those time frames, restore seniority. It's like they never left. It's called the escalator clause. Reinstate employment benefits, training or refreshing skills. Sometimes they'll come back and spend a period of time, and so there's a requirement that they may need some training or refreshing skills to get back to where they are, and that's part of the deal. And no discrimination or retaliation. So most players are pretty good about this, but there are those that sometimes need reminders. Okay, next slide. Okay, so an ombudsman, that's my role, and along with many, is an individual who investigates and attempts to solve complaints and problems as between employers and employees and employer, or between students and a university. It does apply to these same rules apply to students going to school. So we're the neutral third party. So we're not on either side. What was a condition? So that service member will send in, we'll call the 1-800 number and file a claim and say, this is what's going on with my employer. So we listen to that, and then we call the employer. So see what the employer's position is, and then we'll try to resolve that at that employer level, employer and service member level. And that's our job. We're the neutral third party. A lot of times it's a first line supervisor that doesn't know the rules, or maybe a small company that's not familiar with USERRA. A lot of times we'll see the issues are resolved once everybody knows what the requirements are, and it goes on. If it's not resolved, we'll talk about more about that a little bit here. Okay, so we go through a training. Like I said, we're confidential and neutral third party. The stuff that all my notes I shred, we're required to get rid of those once we turn in a report. We answer questions. That's a lot of it's just information that we put out. It makes it possible for both for the employer and to the service member. Sometimes the service member will feel that they have some kind of a right that they really don't, and sometimes they'll feel that we're going to come in on their side, and that's not the case either. We're a neutral third party, and we're a mediator between service members and their employers. And about 80% of the cases are resolved, and we have a 14-day limit. When we case, it's 14 days, and we it's either resolved or not resolved. And so, but most of them are resolved. Once again, once people know what's going on, or sometimes if it's a first line supervisor or a lower level HR department doesn't understand USERRA, usually if you go to the corporate or you go to the senior management, a lot of times we're able to get those results. And a lot of times it's just a matter of learning what the rules are. And okay, this is how this works. And we take training for that. Next slide. So we help you understand what are the rights and responsibilities, and we mediate. That's our main job as the SGR. And then we have an award system. The next slide, we're talking a little bit about that. And there's our website. Nicole put another one on the end of this briefing that does a good job on showing our website. So you just go to esgr.mil or just type in, I just Google it. When I go to it, just ESGR, this stuff comes up. And there's a lot of information on that website. We're going to take a look a little bit at that when we do the frequently asked questions. Okay, next slide. So here's our award program. The only way you get a Patriot Award is you have to have a reserve member nominate you for that award. It's a pretty neat thing. Sometimes we'll have the service member we'll present it. Sometimes if they ask, one of us will go and present that. And I've presented Patriot Awards to somebody in a small conference room or a lunch room, and a breakfast where it was a late shift, and they're coming out the late shift. They're there. I've presented them in larger conference rooms. We presented Patriot Awards to one of ours was to one of the vice presidents of the Boeing company, and it was a major, like 300 people sitting there, and they had video going around the country. So it's various ways. We each one of those are unique, and all of them are really good. But it's a service member's way of saying thank you for being a great employer, and it's a great way to recognize those employers, which are mostly employers, are really good. Then you can go the above and beyond. That's an award that being a good employer, but they went above and beyond what would be required. Some employers will make up the difference in pay. Some employers will stay in touch with the family and whether they're being deployed, and do other things that are beneficial to the service member. 7 SEALs, that's the next step up. Then off here on the left corner, that's the Patriot Award, and that's we give those out at the state level, and we have an annual planning awards banquet for the ESGR, and that's usually when we'll invite employers out. The one on the right there, that's the Freedom Award, and I think there's 15 of those that are presented. Small companies, a large company, and a public a public company, a government agency. And we've been very fortunate in the state of Washington. A lot of our major corporations, Microsoft, Boeing, Starbucks, Amazon, they've all received the Freedom Award. And these are presented at a big dinner back in DC with a lot of important people are back there, and it's a very prestigious award. We also had a small company. I think they only had like 4 or 5 employees, and 2 of them deployed. And they, this employer took care of those 2 employees all the time they're gone, took care of the family. And it's just a great story of how somebody was really taking care of somebody who was deployed overseas, and they came back, and then they have the job of, they have to replace those two employees for that period of time. So that's a real challenge for them, and they stepped to that challenge and did a great job. So yeah, I see you already went to the next. That's listed up the the spouse Patriot Award too. That you can put your spouse can put in for somebody. And once again, the only way you get these awards is have a service member recommend them. Next slide. And there's a real busy slide, but we like to recognize, and when we do a Patriot Award presentation, we also make out a news clip, and so information there's a lot of times a lot of companies want to take a look at that and put that out. They can put that out on their websites or their things, and we'll put them out into the media. So it's another great way to recognize that you've got great employers and the great job you're doing in the community and for our service members. Okay, next slide. So once again, you nominate. This is for a service member. It's really easy. You're on the website. You just fill out the form. So this is my employer. This is who I am. This is what they did for me while I was deployed, or actually it doesn't have to be even when they're deployed. If your weekend drill, a lot of times being gone on the weekend is very inconvenient for some employers, and so they're really good about that, and readjusting your schedule and making sure that you get your rest when you come back, and all the things that go along with that. So we ask the service members, if you got a great employer, nominate them for a Patriot Award. Put it in for that. It's a great way to serve and to recognize your employer. Next slide. And here's again on the boss lift. And this is for the reserves, and it's a chance to show your employer what you do. We've taken employers out to the Yakima. Was in the 81st Brigade out there in Yakima, and we'd bring people out there in the field, and they would see how hard these service members work when they're in the field. It's not an easy weekend when they're out doing that sort of thing, or 2 weeks and they're gone for annual training. And it's a good chance for them to see it and see some great stuff. And what we usually try to do is treat them with some MREs, so meals ready to eat, so that the soldiers eat in the field. And that's usually one of the highlights of that, being out there, and then seeing some of the great things that our reserve members do on a weekend basis and on an annual training. And it prepares us to go and provide defense for the nation. Half the armed forces are in the reserves. In the Navy Reserve, 25% of the Navy Reserve is aviation. Uncle Sam spends a lot of money training them to be aviators, and then they decide maybe they want to go work for Boeing or work for an airline or some other job, but they still want to serve. And so you have this high qualified, highly trained individual that works for a company, but also is available to go out and fly missions or do other tasks as needed. And then with the National Guard, of course, they deploy a lot for a variety of reasons. And this is one of those KC-135s. I flew back to DC on one of those, and the number on the aircraft was 58- something. So I asked the crew chief, does that mean that airplane was built in 1958? He says, that's right. So the great product of the Boeing company, and they're still flying. And this is the 141st Air Refueling Wing, and they went up and watched and fueled the F-15 when they're in flight. Boeing is building a new one, so we'll see how that one, maybe get a chance of flying that someday. So here's some frequent, we're going to look at some frequently asked questions. Does USERRA protect Guard and Reserve members if service was voluntary or a weekend drills? And the answer is yes. Is the Guard and Reserve member required to provide written orders or military duty? And that answer is no. They don't, not required, but if we ask that to do that, it's not required by law. Does the Guard and Reserve member have to find a replacement for their absence on military duty? And the answer is that is no. I actually worked a case where the policy was if you're going to be gone for the weekend, it was a recreation city recreation department and Parks and Rec, and they said, well, that's our policy. I said, well, yeah, that's not really. So I said, well, and that was one I sent to their to the city HR. So you better check with the your city HR department, see what they say. And then it came back, and so they the service member was able to be up. Love this job, but also love serving in the military. Does Guard and Reserve have to serve as use vacation time for military service? And the answer is no. They can, but they don't. It's not required. They don't have to pay them where they're gone, but sometimes they want to retain that vacation time because sometimes after you're coming off a deployment or coming off your service, you still want your time to spend with your family. And once again, the family and your job are the two things that help to keep qualified members in the reserves. So here's the contact information. This is ESGR and how to get a hold of us. And the 1-800 number, that's available to employers, and that's the number we always tell our service members to contact. And then you have DOL vets. So what happens as an ombudsman, at the end of a case, if it's resolved, then it's resolved. If it's not resolved, the service member has two options. They can fill out a vets form 1010, and that goes to Department of Labor vets, the Federal Department of Labor. The Federal Department of Labor takes a look at that that case, and they will determine whether they have a case or they don't have a case. If they have a case, then they refer it over to the Department of Justice, and a Department of Justice attorney shows up at the employer and says, we need to work out this issue. The other option a service member has is to get a private attorney. I had a case where this guy was a regional salesman, but he was also a helicopter pilot, and he loved to fly. And he was spending a lot of time flying, but he was also doing very well in his sales. And he was one of their top salesmen. And so the company, of course, wanted him to make more sales if he spent more time rather than being out flying the helicopter. He says, well, I'm one of your top employees and I still want to fly. And so he hired a attorney, had enough money where he hired an attorney, and that's what he decided to do on that case. So, but the DOL vets, that's the next step, and they do a great job, and they're going to talk a little bit about what they do in one of these other breakouts.
John, I believe Shannon had her hand raised and wanted to say something.
I don't see that. So Shannon.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to John for the excellent information about ESGR, about what you do and how you support service members. Honestly, I think we're very lucky to have such a great partnership with ESGR throughout the state of Washington. I just, before we moved on, wanted to summarize and emphasize a couple of things, and then also talk about DOL vets role as well. So the employers, yeah, so they kind of get a full picture of what we do. Yeah. So a couple of things. John was talking about how ESGR, as an ombudsman, how if a service member feels that their rights in the workplace were violated, they were discriminated against due to their membership in the military service, that they could reach out to an ombudsman, and that ombudsman is a neutral party that can mediate on their behalf, right? That can mediate and say, okay, how can we resolve this at the lowest level between this service member and the employer, right? So he also alluded to what happens if they're unable to resolve it. So that's where DOL vets comes in. He mentioned something about a 1010 form. So Couple of things. USERRA, the Uniform Services Employment Reemployment Rights Act, does cover National Guard and reservists, but it also protects veterans in the workplace and those applying to enter into the military service. So it protects all types of service members in that respect. If a service member feels as if their USERRA rights have been violated, they have the option, if they're a National Guard or reservist, to reach out to an ombudsman, but they also have the option to file a USERRA claim. Once a USERRA claim is filed, then that claim is under the purview of DOL vets, right? And an investigator is assigned. We have a statutory obligation. Everybody says that the federal government is really slow, but in this case, we are not. So we have a statutory obligation to try to resolve the claim within 90 days. So an investigator will reach out to that claimant and will discuss the claim with them. And we as investigators, just like ESGR, are neutral. We are not advocating on the behalf of the claimant. We are not advocating on behalf of the employer. We are trying to see if a USERRA violation exists and what remedies may be applied. So when we talk about remedies, again, we're investigators. We're not attorneys. We're not, ambulance chasers. We're not here to, take the employer down, to make them pay, to sue them for everything that they're worth. No. It is to make that service member whole. So with that being said, as an employer, it is important that you understand what your responsibilities are. And that's why I'm so happy that John has provided this presentation. And like he said, most employers want to do the right thing. They want to support veterans. They want to support service members, National Guard and reservists. They may just not be aware of what the responsibilities are under USERRA. So that's where reaching out to ESGR or reaching out to DOL vets, our office specifically, we'll put our emails in there. If you're an HR professional, if you're an employer and you just have a question like, is this correct? Am I doing the right thing? Am I supporting this service member? Can I do this? What are my left and right limits? You can always give us a call. We have employers that have called us just to make sure they're doing the right thing. Couple of things about USERRA that I just want to kind of foot stomp. One, it protects veterans, those applying for military service, National Guard and reservist, and it protects them in all aspects of employment. Okay, so that's applying for if I could speak, it would help. Applying for employment, right? It protects them in promotions, it protects their benefits, it protects them in termination as well. And when we talk about discrimination, I know one of the slides that John talked about was in discrimination. We're talking about discrimination based upon their military service. So if it's just basic discrimination, right? Or if it's a reasonable accommodation, right? That would be something that would be more like equal EEO or ADA. We are focused on discrimination based on military service or prior military service or application for military service. So it's one thing that I wanted to foot stomp there a little bit. Another thing that a lot of employers get a little bit confused on is the 5-year thing. So one of the slides that John had mentioned that it protects those service members that have 5 years total or up to 5 years of cumulative service. A lot of employers go, wait, 5 years employed with me? No. That's 5 years of cumulative service. So if you look at that, and let's say we're using a National Guard or reservist for an example, right? That might be, okay, they went on a training assignment for a month. They were gone for a weekend. They're 2 weeks of drill, or they were deployed for about a year, because a lot of National Guard and reservists have been deployed. It's counting up those different times where they performed military service, not how long they've actually been employed with you. So that's one thing. Another thing that, another common question that a lot of employers have is that application for reemployment question. So like John was saying, when a service member, like National Guard reservist, goes to perform service, maybe they're doing their weekend drill, maybe they're doing their 2 weeks of training, right? They have to have enough time to make it there safely, to make it back safely. And then there's specific timeframes in which they need to reapply for employment. It doesn't mean they have to go through the entire application process. It just means that we always suggest it be in writing via email, It just means they have to inform their employers. We always say, inform your first line supervisor and put HR in the CC line. It just means they have to inform them that I've made it back safely and that I plan on returning to work on this date, right? That's all it means. So some folks get real hung up on the reapplying thing. Oh, they have to go through the entire application process. No, no, no. That's burdensome on both parties, both for the employer and for the service member. And then the last piece that I really wanted to emphasize, and I think this is where ESGR really comes in and we appreciate them so much, is we always want to solve things at the lowest level, right? So we always want to say, hey, let's educate both sides so you guys both know what your responsibilities are. And the way you can do that is communicate, 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 and plan. If you are an employer, if you're an HR professional, and you know you have a service member that is going on a long deployment, maybe they're going for a year, right? And you know they have a job that needs to be backfilled, but you have to plan for when they return. Start talking to them now. You also have the ability to talk to their unit, to plan together. So that way the service member is fully supported. Everybody's on the same page. You know what the service member's rights are, and you know what's going to happen when they return. Usually when claims are filed, it's because one, both sides maybe didn't understand what their rights and responsibilities were, and two, they didn't plan. So plan and communicate, and always feel free to reach out to us if you have questions. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to foot stomp and emphasize, but I don't want to take over the presentation, so I'm going to hand the mic back over to John. Thank you.
Hey, no, that's great though, because you work full time. This is your job, right?
So DOL vets, we are investigators, right? We go through training to be investigators, and we are the agency that's tasked with investigating USERRA. But we also do quite a few other things, and I think I alluded to that during my spiel earlier. But yes, we are the investigators tasked with investigating USERRA claims. So that's why I said, if you're an employer and you just have some questions, you can always reach out to ESGR, but you can reach out to us as well, especially if you're just going, am I right? Am I interpreting this correctly? One last thing, USERRA supersedes state laws. Okay, so I have talked to some employers, and it was just an education thing where they go, well, we're in an at-will state. And I said, well, that's great, but USERRA is federal law. So education time, right? So it supersedes state laws. However, Washington state, because we're fabulous, right? Washington state laws, actually, they have their own USERRA laws that are very, they pretty much, for the most part, mirror the federal law. So Washington state as a state does support service members and veterans as well. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. Okay, I'm really done this time.
No, I let you do that. So that my point is that we're out there, we'll try to do our best, and a lot of times we can get it resolved. But then when you call that 1-800 number, those are full-time, highly trained National Guard folks or work for the or ESGR folks that do this. And the same thing with DOL vets. Now you're turning that over to the professionals, and that's what they do, and take it to the next step. So that's great that these services are available to our reserve members. Okay, so the next thing, we want to go to the ESGR website. And Nicole, did you do that?
Yeah, give me just a second. I'm working.
Yeah, I got you. I'm doing the same thing. So I'm gonna
Okay.
step away a second and
All right, the ESGR website.
okay, go to the ESGR. It's a great website. If you just look across the top, you look at the different categories. If this what about ESGR? If you click that one on the left, it takes you right down the bottom, and that's the little video that we just showed. There's a little show of the video. But what we're going to look at today, I'll just go across the top. Employers, I think information for service members, volunteers. We always want to be asked. We were looking for more volunteers. We would love to have more employers. You don't have to serve in the military. Some of our best volunteers are people who've never served, and but they want to do something and be involved in this, and maybe go on a boss lift or two. Then our awards, the whole thing on the awards. Then there's UCERRA. news events, and then a resource library. There's a lot of things you can go look in there. So today, just to show you, this is to show you this thing, but we're going to go to USERRA, and they're going to come down to where are you there? The USERRA, and go down to where it says frequently asked questions. Are you getting there? That's our great website.
Yes, sir. It should be coming up. And I believe
yeah, there you
Monique has got
There
her
you go.
hand raised.
Who does?
Monique.
Monique, okay.
Yeah, well, I just had a couple of questions.
Okay.
It's not necessarily tied to your site,
No, that's
but
fine.
if an employer wanted to go on a boss lift, but their veteran or service member employee has not invited them, can an employer get an invite regardless?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, we a lot of times they'll say, well, we want to give priority to our service members, and that's what we do. We say, hey, if you got an employer who wants to go on the trip, but a lot of times it's other employers. When we do a job fair up here in Marysville, we will invite them out to the ship. That we'll send out things to other employers. A lot of employers have been given Patriot awards and stuff. People that will want to go. So yes, so the answer to that question, you don't have to be you don't have to be nominated. Just we want all employers, to be able to chance to see what our folks do. Does that answer your question? Okay.
That's the first question. And then the second question is, if you have a reservist or a National Guardsman under your employment, should you be trying to reach out and coordinate with ESGR before they're ever deployed, before there's ever an issue, or should you wait until they get deployed and then wait to see if it all goes well? Or should you just go ahead and be coordinating with ESGR and asking for their guidance in advance?
That's kind of a case by case thing. A lot of your companies, your HR people are familiar with USERRA. It's part of their training. SHRM does it. There's other, so a lot of them are. But if they want to, that's a great thing for them. And then we usually tell the service member, have them refer them to the website so they can get an idea. And so there's a little bit of, depending upon the size of the company, there's sometimes a little give and take between the service member and the employer. So what's the deal here? And they'll kind of get them up to speed. So it's kind of, I would say it's kind of up to the employer what they want to do. If they want to know more, they can go to our website or they can call our 1-800 number. If they're satisfied with how things are going, then just kind of go with the flow. Some do that. Some like your bigger companies, some of them are very familiar with how all this works, and so the ins and outs. So I don't know if I answered your question. It's kind of a
that's perfect. And then you have 5 more minutes until our session ends, and
Yep,
we're all wrapped into the other room.
Yep, and I am planning to stick to the schedule. So so this is the frequently asked questions, and it just talks a little bit about the types of military service that are covered by USERRA. That's the first one. And as person serving in active components, armed forces, National Guard, and medical systems, the Commissioned Corps for Public Health Services, a whole bunch of people there. Which employers are covered by USERRA? To all public, private, and government employers. That's basically it applies to everybody. There are certain exceptions, but that's the main one. Can an employer discriminate based on past or present military service? That was a good comment made earlier, that we're talking discriminate based on their military service, and the answer is no. And their initial hiring position. I had somebody that I'm a retired teacher, and I was at the job fair, and a recruiter come up and said, "Hey, I got a teacher that wants to join the National Guard. Does the school district have to let them go? Because they'd be gone for a period of time?" And the answer was yes, they have to let them go and come back, and they have to hire them back just like they never left. And actually, as a teacher and being in the National Guard, they're very complimentary because you got your weekends off, and I had 3 months off in the summer, so I could spend 6 to 8 weeks of active duty every year, which really helped when it comes to finances. So, and also gave me a chance to do some things that needed to be done and help my career in the National Guard. So anyway, so can an employer discriminate based on past and present? No, go get that one. Does a UCERA protect against discrimination by initial hiring decisions? And the answer is yes, your rights are protected. So let's get out, what criteria must an employer meet to be eligible under USERRA for employment after military service? And there it lists some of the things that are there. What are the guidelines USERRA provides for employees to return to work after completion of the military service? And that's the list that when you won't have the PowerPoint, but you can go back to these frequently asked questions, and a lot of that stuff was in that PowerPoint is answered in this. Is an application for reemployment required to be in any particular form? And you don't have to go. It's when that what they really get. A lot of times you get wrapped around the reemployment issue, and you're coming back on the job. You really haven't. It's like you never left your job, so you don't have to. You just have to let them know you're coming back, and they're required to let you come back. What documents satisfy requirement for employers to establish eligibility for employee employment after more than 30 days of employment? And here it lists out your DD 214, copy of your orders, letter from the commanding officer. So there's some things there that they can do. Can an employer contact an employee's military chain of command to request verification of military service? And yes, you can do that. In fact, as a company commander, I called a service member, said he can't go, his boss wouldn't let him go. So I called the boss up and I said, hey, you got a service member here, and he's saying he can't go to annual training this year. And the boss says, oh no, it's just the opposite. This is a good time for them to be gone because the department work is slow during that period of time. So that's just one less person. And so that I went back to the service member and said, hey, your boss says it's a good time. He goes, oh, okay. So it was this last year and 6-year obligation, and he just thought maybe you get out of going down to training. So sometimes it goes both ways. What types of discharge and separation from uniformed services make the employee eligible for reemployment rights under USERRA? And then it lists some there. So are federal employees protected by USERRA? And the answer is yes. So that's pretty much it. So you can go through there. So thanks for being on this. Thanks for being a great employer. And we really appreciate what you do. And remember, we all serve.
Thank you so much, John. Great presentation. If there are any questions, we still have about 1 minute left.
Yeah, I'm sorry I went along.
It was great. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, if you leave the room, then you'll just be dropped back into the main session where you'll be able to select your next breakout group.
Sounds good. Thank you, Monique. And thanks, John. Thanks for the great information.